All right. Welcome to not podcast. Welcome to the platform, episode 3. This is Conrad Sokolowski here with Tom Baker, and we are yet again in front of a roaring fire. And it is January 22nd, 2019, Tuesday evening. And we're going to have some discussions here. Tom, about 17 minutes ago now, came up with what he wanted to at least start this episode with. So, Tom, go ahead and take it away and take it away.
So I thought it would be great to start this episode out with the subject being depression. And with that, what do you know about depression, Conrad?
Depression. All right, so we're going to talk about depression. What do I know? As professionally, nothing. What do I know about it as a human being who has experienced it? I would say a little bit. I've went through my bouts, and I know the feeling of it. I know the psychology behind it, at least personally. Like, again, I'm not going to come at it from an academic perspective. I can only speak about it through experience, going through it and how I personally overcome it. But that would be the extent to what I know about depression. I can tell you this, I know that it messes a lot of people up.
Yeah. I know firsthand what it feels like to be depressed severely, clinically, and I can speak firsthand about it. What I want to gear, like two thoughts that I have for the platform today.
Well, this will be good because I could ask you as a person. I could ask you the questions. I mean, I would just ask it as myself. I'm trying to say it, speaking for like the people listening, but this will be good actually. Sorry to interrupt you. Go ahead.
No, I'd prefer you to.
Would you prefer holding the mic too? Would you prefer holding it? Because right now we only have one microphone, and we pass it back and forth. It does become a little bit of a nuisance to have to hold it, but if you don't mind me pulling away in the middle of your sentences.
No, that's fine.
Okay. All right.
Two for two.
I'll try to avoid that from now on.
No, here, I can hold it.
So just hold it by this shock mount here, and it won't, yeah.
Okay.
And then just mind that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you want the mic, would you raise your hand?
You know what? Here, actually, let me hold it, and the reason why is because I have the headphones on, and we can hear mic noise. So we'll make do. We'll get a second and third and fourth microphone soon, but go ahead.
We say that every episode. Okay, so back to the topic at hand. So two things that I wanted to gear this conversation towards. One is this idea that everybody battles depression to some degree. Would you agree with that?
Yes, I would say that. I would say that to a certain degree. I would say some people go through what they call like hard times or difficult times, but listen, I don't think a lot of I can't say that, but I don't think everyone has experienced severe depression. But however, I can't judge that under anything. Typically when somebody's really, really depressed, they shy away from people. They'll become hermits and lock themselves in the room and try to avoid people. So typically when you see people out, they don't show you, even if they are going through a very hard and depressing time, they don't necessarily show it outwardly. They might they're going about their day, and but yeah, so I would have to say that there are extreme levels. Some go through mediocre depression, some go through extremes, very severe depression. But yeah.
Okay, so the Webster dictionary definition of psychiatry depression is a condition of general emotional dejection and withdrawal. Sadness greater and more prolonged than that warranted by any objective reason.
So they said sadness prolonged.
Yeah.
So sadness prolonged doesn't necessarily specify how sad, because we're talking about, because prolonged sadness is one thing. You can be sad for a long period of time, but what about when you go from sad to very sad to depressed to miserably depressed and to suicidal depression, and then what's after that, really, right?
Well, I think okay, I heard what you said, and what I'm going to do is to get a working definition going. Whether you agree with it or not is irrelevant. This will just be our working definition. The key word is withdraw. Okay, so like when you withdraw because of the sadness. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So that's when so sadness because you lost a friend, family member, etc.
So sadness would be like phase 1, and then once you stay in phase 1 too long, you start to trickle down to more severe conditions.
Yeah, anytime you withdraw, and you shut the outside world out, and I'm like, we're not, speaking scientifically or giving a objective definition, right? Just for working conditions right now, our working definition is depression. What I was saying is I think everybody battles depression to some degree. That would be my blanket statement. And I said, do you agree with that? You said yes, to a degree. To a certain degree, I think everybody battles depression. Okay, well, what is depression? Because we need a working definition of it. It is when sadness causes you to withdraw from your normal activities. Okay, it's a very subjective thing, but we don't have to argue every case of
we don't have to get too analytical.
Yeah.
I get you. Okay, I agree. Yeah, of course.
Okay, so everybody to some extent battles with it to some extent. Now, some cases don't even need, any correcting. They ought to correct because it's such a mild case, right? Mm-hmm. Lose a job, whatever, you get over it. Okay, so that's the first thing. And the reason I want to talk about that, and I'm just going to throw a quick thought out there, and I want to talk about it in more depth, but I want to get to the second point. The reason I bring up that first point is because if we can agree that everybody deals with it, then we can poke holes in this idea that it's embarrassing, and therefore you shouldn't talk about it or you should mask it, because it's not those two. You shouldn't mask it. It's not embarrassing because everybody battles with it. And the second thing is, the second thing that I want to talk about is ways that we can battle depression. Very practical ways that you and I have found in our own lives that work to battle depression. Because depression, so I was talking with somebody today actually about depression. They opened up to me about being depressed, and the context was, hey, I think I want to see a therapist, and my immediate response was, I don't know what's coming next, but yes, you should. Everybody should see a therapist. Healthy people should have a therapist, and especially people that are sick. And then they said, because I'm getting depressed in certain situations, etc. And what I said to them is that depression, comes on so quickly without sometimes there's nothing we can do about it to stop the depression from coming on. And it's like, how can we fight it? Like, what are some practical things that we can do to fight depression? Now, do you remember, like, would you say, how depressed would you say you were in California when you went through that little stint? Or I guess maybe that's not fair. Like, when were you the most depressed in your life?
Man.
Right now?
That's a great
10 minutes ago.
That's a great question, man, because I'm looking back and I'm saying, okay, I moved to California when I was 22, and that was the first time away from home. Moved out of state. I was living in Ohio at the time, and you're young and you go out. Anytime you go out away from home, away from family and whatnot, that's hard that's hard in itself. But man, I would say that you grow up with okay, let's just put away for a second the what kind of household you grew up in. Let's just take that away, because that's a huge attribute to how you spend your teen years, and then your 20s and 30s and whatnot, and of course until the end of your days. So let's just omit that for the time being. I would have to say that those were times of angst. Yeah, there was depression, but man, I would have to say that the most severe was probably this last year. I would say about a year ago today, I became my most depressed. But here's what's interesting, man. Here's what's interesting. I went through two forms of severe depression. The first one was a slow building depression that grew with intensity and severity over time because of what my thoughts were constantly focused on, consciously, subconsciously, and unbeknownst to me at the time, that perpetuated my depression. It got more and more and more and more. Eventually, it got just really, really bad to where I was forced to look to new things. And we could talk about that, how that all came about. And that happened around like 23, 24. I'm 35 now. But honestly, Tom, I would say the hardest time I went through. Okay, so here's what's interesting. When I went through that depression, that was depression attached with hope. Because you had something you were like, man, you kept telling yourself, okay, things are really sucky right now, but it's going to get better. It's going to get better. Someday this is all going to just not be like this. Okay, so there was that. So you almost became okay with your depression because you kept telling yourself that narrative. Then the hardest, and man, I wouldn't even know if I would call it depression, but I would say the most psychologically taxing time for me was a year ago when I became extremely disoriented psychologically. We can get deeper into that, but that I wouldn't say was it did cause a lot of angst, anxiety. It caused a lot of anxiety, but it was a disorientation, and I think that what attributed to that is was also coming into like your mid-30s, and you know how people, they go through their like midlife crisis and whatnot, and that can happen at certain different stages. And man, as I get older, I look at people in their lives and say, man, they're going through a really crappy time, but that's just what happens. You hit a point in your life, and even if things seem to be going fine, you hit this point in your life where it's kind of like a stopping point to reflect, and it could be a time of depression, sadness, and it's not the most joyful time, even though you could be a generally joyful person, you know, but you still hit these moments, and so that's interesting. So that's the answer to my question. I would say back in early 20s, and then most severe psychological thought process was about a year ago, and that was the most disorienting. And you know, we could discuss that whenever you want, but yeah.
So one thing, just
I want to ask you that same question too after your thought here.
okay. So one thing that comes to my mind after hearing what you just said is that depression can come about in two ways. It can be self-inflicted and it can be trauma-induced, right? Like some things are out of your control. You know, some things. So the first scenario is we are depressed by our own choices, things that we, anxieties and regrets from things that we have done or in which we didn't do,
Yep.
or things that we didn't do, which we wish we did do. And then the second thing is depression can be brought upon us from outside forces. You know, so your question to me is, when in my life was I most depressed? Well, to give the viewers, the listeners, some context, the reason, correct me if I'm wrong, but the reason for this platform is primarily because of depression, right? I mean, it's like the opposite. Again, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm totally speaking off the cusp right now, like without thinking.
Well, yeah, answer this question. Why are you doing this?
Well, can I finish my thought before you ask me a third question? I'm thinking out loud, but to finish that thought that I just had, the opposite of depression to some extent is purpose and self-worth. Right? Would you agree with that? Without being absolute, right? And without being conclusive and like being a know-it-all, just thinking off the top of my head, like the opposite of depression and in my experience is purpose and self-worth.
Yes, I would agree with that. I would say for me the most important thing is being wholeness. I would say the opposite of depression, and as Gary Zukav stated in his book Seed of Soul, which I've mentioned many times, having a splintered soul or splintered personality. I think it's splintered soul, or being a splintered person. It's wholeness. The other side would be the polar side. The polar opposite would be being whole. And then I think with wholeness comes purpose, meaning, and so on and so forth. But that's the way I view it. Wholeness, being whole. And I could sit here and give you what my definition of wholeness is. But go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. So even based on that, because wholeness is the umbrella, right? Wholeness encompasses everything that we're going to talk about.
Yeah.
That is the very reason for the platform.
Exactly.
We are here today on this platform, for this platform, because of this platform, to be advocates for wholeness.
Yes.
We may all, viewers, listeners, and us alike, have different working definitions of what it means to be whole. Mm-hmm. But we can all agree on some common denominators of what it means to be whole. Okay, so wholeness is the umbrella of the idea, but if you had a pie chart and the circle was wholeness, a huge chunk of that, I think, would be purpose and value or self-worth. And even within those pie charts diagram, you would have other factors. Like when I say self-worth, I mean value and
subcategories.
Yeah, exactly. And so, having said all that, and that was a little bit of a tangent, like to answer your original question, and also I'm sorry, to finish that thought and to kind of answer your second question, the platform was birthed out of depression because you and I have both been going down the same path, and ironically, Conrad and I have gone down similar paths at the same time in our past. I mean, we both had a spiritual awakening around the same time.
Yeah.
We both moved out to California around the same time, same stages in life, experienced new things in the same stages of life.
Yeah, we're only 15 days apart in age.
Yeah, and 15 days apart, we became friends in the 4th grade, have been good friends ever since, minus that stint where you guys broke my skateboard, which I mean that traumatized me. I was depressed when that happened, and so this most recent depression, mine hit around the same time. I went through a very traumatic divorce, and that speaks to my my thought process, where I said some things can be brought upon yourself by regrets that you did do and things you didn't do, and also by outside factors. I did not want to get divorced, and I did not want things to happen the way they did, because they did, and a lot of it was because of my own fault and disciplines, lack thereof. Because I went through a divorce, I became clinically depressed. I mean, I became a completely different person. I withdrew from society in ways. I'm an extrovert. There were many days where I spent in bed. I had no motivation, no self-worth, no purpose, and I battled that mentally for a long time. And because of that, and that was in circa 2016, 17, 18. So it was a 3-year stint. I just became what I would consider healthy, even though I'm not as healthy as I want to be. I became healthy in Thanksgiving this year when I visited you. That was my trip where I kind of put off the old self and had a rebirth of sorts. I was like, you know what? I got to stop doing the things that I've been doing, and I need to step into this new season.
Yeah.
And so, to bring it all together, to bring us present to this moment right now, that's the last time, or that was my most serious depression, and that is what birthed for me this platform. Because if I'm vulnerable right now, if I'm transparent, if I didn't have kids and I didn't believe in Jesus Christ and a hope, an eternal hope, I would have committed suicide. Mm-hmm. I would have taken my own life. I was so low, multiple times. I mean, there were times where I literally would say out loud, God, I wish this semi truck would just fall asleep, the driver, and just plow me off the road, right? Because I didn't want to take my own life. I just wanted to be dead.
Yeah.
And so, like, I didn't have, because I had kids and because I had an eternal hope, I didn't want to be a coward and selfish, even though the alternative was still cowardice and selfish. I wanted my life to end out of my control. I wanted to veer off the road because of ice or whatever, or a deer to come out and hit me, whatever. multiple times, I mean, several times a day for months on end, did not want to live, did not want to wake up, had no purpose. And the thing is, it affects so many people on so many different levels. And talking with this person today, I understood how being ashamed of it, like here, this was in a group setting that this person opened up to me and others. And you could tell they were timid and embarrassed to open up. And once it was said, it was welcomed with open arms. Like, yeah, welcome to the club. We've all been depressed, and we've had those thoughts of not being valued in purpose. And so the point of this session would be, okay, I have two questions for you that I'd love for you to take in any way that you want, to answer in any way, shape, or form that you want, right? Whatever comes to mind. Are there ways, it's rhetorical, but are there ways to prevent depression, which is so interesting because that's what we're learning about right now. Like to speak to the universe, to have a positive attitude, to manifest our own things, right? Yeah. So is there a way to prevent depression? And then are there ways to overcome depression once it's already set in?
That first question is a good one because
camp there.
Man, it's kind of like oh man, let's use an analogy here. If you were to teach a kid to never put their hand on the fire because they're going to get burned, and they never put their hand on the fire, is that better than the child who does put their hand in the fire and feel the burn? Because
it depends what your definition of better is.
Which process is better for learning? Is it, I'm going to take your word for it because I'm just going to take your word for it. Let's just say dad's the authority.
Yep.
And you're a young kid, you look up to your dad, and your dad is all-knowing, he's your hero, and then he says, don't put your hand in the fire, you're going to get burned, trust me. Okay, fine, I'm listening to you. Done. Okay, so there's that. Now the kid will go his whole life, let's just say hypothetically, the kid never puts his hand in the fire his whole entire life, and that's that, right?
Yeah.
Then you got the kid who says, okay, fine, my dad told me not to, but I'm going to do it anyway because I just got to see. Mm-hmm. So he does it, burns his hand, says, man,
I'm an idiot.
I'm never doing that again. Yeah, I'm never doing that again. That hurt. I know. I have the experience that I will never do that again. I know. There is no middleman. It's just me in the fire now. So I know I can look the fire directly at and say, I will never put my hand on you because I know how bad you hurt.
So which one is better? I would say the first one is better because that's wisdom. The second one is probably going to be a better teacher of that principle because of the experience. He's going to speak from passion, he or she is going to speak from firsthand passion. Don't do this. I did it. Don't be like me. Right? So that's my answer. The first person is better overall. Like that is the better way to learn. That is the epitome of wisdom, right? Like to be told something and to adhere to it because you trust the person that told you to do it, and it is right. It is wise counsel. We're not talking about subjective things, right? We're talking about it. Cause and effect. If you do this, this is going to happen. Okay, I trust you. I don't do that. Who is better off? Well,
that's a hard question. Dude,
yeah, no, I get it.
Here's the thing. Here's what I just thought of. Depression. However, whichever way that you come into depression, however your experience gets you there, it's almost as if here's what I do know, man. When you become very depressed, you get to a stage where you're very depressed, and then prolonged depression is what's the killer. And if you stay in depression, it gets worse and worse and worse, and it's just a constant spiral down, and then everything becomes dark. Your mind just fogs up, and darkness is all around you. Man, it is horrible. It is a horrible feeling. But I had this thought that depression is almost kind of a way for a person to really start to take the time and get to know some hard truths. It's like you open you get to a point where you get so low and so hardened that, well, I wouldn't say hardened, but you get so low, and then you reach a point where you start to open up to wisdom and say, man, I need something here.
Okay, and I don't think we should argue or debate, that factor of this topic, because it's off topic. But isn't it better to come to that understanding without having to go through that? I mean, wouldn't you agree that people?
How do you know, though? That's the thing.
I mean, how
do you gauge it?
I mean,
what do you gauge it against? It's like, I just have to take your word for it. It's like, look, man, we have teachers, we have wise men, women, and then we have the ultimate one, like the truth. And if that's up for debate for some people, but that's how I view it. So it's like, man, what better way to get wisdom, truth, knowledge than from the all, like the one. And so,
but apply that to everything in life, right? And there are only some things that you learned the hard way.
Yeah.
There are a lot of things that you just know good and well.
Yeah.
Are like, I mean, you could name a million of them right now that you don't do. Like, hey, you could get rich right now, Conrad, if you went and robbed a bank. You could also go to jail.
Yeah, I mean that's that scenario. But look, man, who hasn't felt the heat of fire? Like, who hasn't been burned?
Yeah. I know. I get it.
It's almost as if there's I think it's almost as if there are some things you just can't truly know until you've had firsthand experience doing it.
And yeah, and to that part, and to that point, and I'll end my thought of that with this. To that point, that is kind of the human flaw, right? That is like what is wrong with us, because we do have to, like, what is it about us humans that do have to touch the stove in order to find out that mom was telling the truth about the stove, right? Like, it's intrinsic in us. Like, you just said, like, who hasn't touched fire? Right. We all do. That's what sucks about us is, man, wouldn't it be so much better if we just knew that?
Yeah, but maybe that's the thing. Maybe that's like the default plan. Look, everything can be perfect, going great for society, individuals, a community, but it's almost as if that default stage, the default, the lowest point is to say, look, this exists. Like, getting to the hardest, lowest point, it has to exist, because just in case you do get there, that's where you're going to really learn.
Yeah.
If you have the discipline to learn by somebody teaching you something, it's let's just say somebody says, hey man, don't do drugs, man, because you're going to get messed up, and it's just don't do them. And then you have a person who's like, yeah, I'll just never do drugs.
Yep.
And then you have the person who does drugs, and they go through a horrible experience. Like you said, they get addicted and things fall apart, and then hopefully they get to that point in their life where they turn things back around. But in that scenario, the person didn't do drugs because they were doing it out of out of some kind of vengeance towards somebody, or they did it out of a necessity. At least the person I'm thinking of, because maybe there are people out there who do drugs to get at somebody, to make a family member, or
to prove a point,
to prove a point,
to
or
get back.
to get back at them, right? But what about those who that's their only, is from what they know, that's their only solution, is to just get out of the reality, just get out of it. This is what helps me cope as a drug. Then, that person, it's like, look, you can't hold that against them. This is all they knew. The hope is to overcome it. But yeah, that's a hard question, and I don't think the answer, it's not a black and white answer. You can say certain things, but not everything. I don't think.
So the original question, though, that I want to get your thoughts on is that you were tackling is, can you prevent depression? And if so, what are some practical ways to prevent depression? Because here's the thing. You take both of those scenarios, the one that you can't control the outside factors or variables that affect your life. There are some things that you can't control. You can't necessarily control getting laid off or fired, or you can't control your spouse wanting a divorce. You can't control your kids rebelling, etc. And then you take the factor of, okay, you made some poor life choices and now you're depressed. You take both of those factors, and wouldn't you say that there are some preventative measures that you could do to cope in a productive, positive way that would not necessarily prevent 100%, but at least fight off depression? Well, like optimism, looking at everything as a solution, or I don't know, looking at everything as a positive, even the negatives, like, okay, I got a flat tire and I'm late for work and I'm possibly going to get fired. All right, that really happened. That could lead to some depression. What if your first initial intentional reaction is to say to yourself, something great is going to come of this, and I'm going to enter a new season of my life, or another door is going to be opened that would not have opened because of this happening.
Well, I would say two things. I would say, number one, you have the individual who, I would say, well, let me just say this. First, I don't think anybody plans for depression and to plan to look forward to overcoming it. It's like, oh man, look, I'm going to figure out how to overcome depression in the event that I do become depressed.
That which is a problem.
Not necessarily. I would have to say that, I mean, you don't necessarily plan for things that, because think about it. If that was a something to be concerned about, then why not why not plan for an asteroid hitting the Earth tomorrow? Like, why not plan for me breaking my legs tomorrow? It's like you'd have to think of every single thing that can go wrong.
Just to answer your question in a very simple way, because not everybody breaks their leg, and an asteroid doesn't come every day. But
not everybody gets. This is going back to what you just mentioned earlier. So I can't remember what I answered to that question, but I would have to now say that not everybody is destined for severe depression.
No, I agree. I agree.
Okay, so yeah.
But they battle with depression to some degree.
I would say people battle with a certain degree of sadness, which could lead to depression, but not everybody. Look, not everybody goes through depression. Like, not everybody's going to go through depression. This is as severe as the person who had the most severe depression.
Yeah.
Think about it. Like, think of somebody who just went through absolute hell, the absolute worst hell, and look, here's a good one. You can say, well, everybody everybody has a death in the family. Somebody close to them, everybody has somebody close to them eventually dies, right? But how come some people get extremely depressed and never get over it? Some might even commit suicide because they have lost somebody dear to them. Versus those who, yeah, somebody passed away, it sucked for a little bit, but we got over it, or we accepted it, or we overcame it. And then there are some who are like, yeah, I was planning for my mother passed away, and she it's all good. Yeah, there's times of sadness, and I do miss her, but life goes on. So wouldn't that be an indication of, number one, how are you genetically wired to handle that situation?
Yes.
How are you brought up?
Yes.
What kind of environment were you brought up in?
Absolutely.
And number two is, what kind of person are you now on a day-to-day basis, assuming that you're now in your 20s, 30s, 40s, and so on, that you're already an adult and that you are pretty much a developed person. So everybody experiences the depression, sadness differently for various factors. And again, I'm not a clinical psychologist, or I'm not a psychiatrist. I mean, they got answers for this, but again, we're coming at this from, at least I'm coming at this from perspective, knowledge, wisdom that I experienced that my experience, because you go through a very hard time, and I figured out certain things to overcome it, and then now it's like, I want to be able to, I mean, there's other people out there who got to be going through tough times. What are they looking for? Something? And so I think, and going back to like what the basis of the platform is, and the purpose, but to just kind of recap, not everybody experiences depression on the same level.
Agreed.
Okay. Okay, and where do we leave off? Past that.
Well, so you were arguing, most recently in our conversation, you were arguing that not everybody needs to have a conscious prevention.
Oh, okay, yeah, that's right, yeah. So let me just finish that thought. Just like, yeah, of course, an asteroid doesn't happen every day, but depression doesn't happen to everybody as equally as severe as it does to the next person. And you can't plan for it. You can't say, oh man, any day could come now where I'm going to be depressed. How do I get over it? I think, you want to know something, Tom? I think we try to overcome depression every single day, maybe subconsciously.
Mm-hmm.
Why do we get up and go to work? Why do we have friends? Why do we be social? I think everything that you do, at least for a lot of people, is actually a way to get over. I mean, that's what we're constantly doing, is it not? I mean, aren't we constantly just doing things so that life doesn't get really miserable? We go to work, we pay for things, we have fires, we have electricity, we have light, we have entertainment, we have all this stuff so that we don't have to get to that baseline horrible level of existence, which is just absolute treachery, misery. Just, you can sit there and think about how awful the world is. You really could. I mean, if you keep telling yourself, if you keep rehearsing certain things in your head, like life's meaningless, everything is just, we're all here by chance, there is no point, oh God, everything's just kind of a waste of time, everything only exists so that we don't have to really face the truths of this world, which is just that this place is really miserable, wretched, and nature, God, or whatever out there just is totally indifferent to whether we survive or die off or are happy or sad. Nobody really cares except for us, and so we're in it alone. And you can really focus on those thoughts, but again, it's like, look, we've evolved as a people, and we are doing things, and maybe some don't even realize it. Maybe some people go through life and say, gosh, why do I do what I do? You reach those points where you start to analyze life, and you look at yourself objectively, and society, and the world you're in, and you could look at it from a perspective of, man, dude, we're only doing everything that we do just so that we don't have to face the treachery of life.
Well, there's so much to be said on this subject. Based on what you just said, like what comes to mind, and it's we have to table it for another conversation. And I think next week we should talk about mythological, beliefs, because the video that we watched in Maine about the lack of people, especially in the West, people believing in mythological things having no eternal purpose and eternal value brings about depression. Because you just have, like, why are we here? Why are we even going through the mundane? But the counter to that is even if you don't believe it's real, like what that video was saying is, even if you don't believe it was real, to have a belief in something higher than you will give you purpose to work on. But yeah, like, are we all just trying to avoid the mundane, or get through a wretched life? Now, not for me. No, I think life's beautiful. I think it's great. It has a lot to offer. I think our reason for being here, I think there is a reason for being here. I think there is a purpose for everyone, and because of that, it gives me hope to go forward. But now that's just that's just what I thought of based on what you said. A couple of things that I would say as maybe counterpoints is that I believe that people. What are we at right now?
I just want to make sure it's still rolling. We're at 47:02:03:04.
Okay. So two things that I wanted to bring up. The first thing is, in my opinion, one of the points of the platform topics, a sub-point, we already talked about why we're doing the platform and what it was birthed about, but a sub-point of why we choose some of the topics, if not all of the topics that are on the platform, is because they're not everyday water cooler conversations. And what I mean by that is, like, let's say, do you know what the water cooler conversations are? Like
when you're at work at the water cooler,
Yeah.
just like, hey, how's the Broncos doing?
Yeah, exactly. The common topical conversations that are brought. I think water. Yes, I think water cooler conversations is a term that we should use regularly in this in the platform, because there are conversations that pertain to anybody that comes to the water cooler, right?
Yeah.
Anybody that comes to the water cooler can jump on, like, oh yeah, the Broncos, they're in the Super Bowl this year. Yeah, what's the over under? Whatever. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think part of the platform is, like, one of the things that I wanted to be involved in the platform was to be a part of, is talking about things that not everybody's talking about. Like, why aren't people talking about ways to prevent depression and to overcome depression on a more regular basis, right? Why aren't people talking about these deeper conversations that pertain to life, that affect us all? They're not they're not topics that come up on the day-to-day interactions that you have with people. Okay, but maybe they should be. And so, to counter to what you were saying is that we shouldn't have this prevent approach, or, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but like that maybe we shouldn't be thinking about ways to prevent depression because not everybody battles with severe depression. My counter to that is, well, having a built-in mechanism or a preventative for depression is good even if you don't face depression, because we all face factors in life that could bring about depression. And my counterpoint, or my second point to that, is this: is you brought up a great thing, is that we all have different thresholds, or we all have different rock bottoms, right? We all can go through the exact similar or same situation where a relative passes away that we had a great connection with. But not everybody gets clinically depressed when their brother dies.
Right.
Okay, so why is that? And you brought up a couple great variables. And my response to that is, because of those variables that you brought up, our DNA, our geographics, our demographics, how we were raised, our status, our wealth, all those things, I think play a role in what I would call built-in mechanisms that prevent depression, right? Like, I was born, or nature versus nurture. I was out of my control, I would say. Maybe a psychologist would say, no, Tom, this wasn't out of your control. You did it subconsciously and consciously. I was born and made and nurtured into an optimist. It doesn't, you know me, man. It doesn't matter what kind of situation you put me in. I will look at the positive. It's not something that I practice. It's not something that I have honed or work at. It's natural. And so, and it doesn't mean that I don't get mad or angry when situations that I perceive are bad happen. If I'm driving and I have a flat tire, yeah, my emotions may get the best of me, but 9 times out of 10, I'll make the best of it.
Yeah.
I'll be like, okay, this is fine. Like, this is going to put me in a different place in my life where I wouldn't have been had this not happened. Okay, so maybe what I went through that made me depressed was a traumatic situation, right? So, like, even though I'm an optimist and I don't usually get depressed, or I wouldn't say that in my past I get depressed easily, that was something that put me in severe depression that I think anybody could have gotten to where I was.
Well, that's a good point you make, because I can attest to that you are, growing up with you, that you were very an optimistic individual. Things go wrong, or if there were boring nights, the solution always came from you. Hey, let's go do something. Let's figure it out. Let's not dwell in this time where we're lacking in enthusiasm, or starting to get sad. So I can attest that. But the question is, with such an optimistic view, look, divorce is hard, and you can't assume that there's people out there who just walk away from a divorce just gung ho, like, oh, well, let's go to the next one.
Yeah.
Unless they just truly didn't care. But maybe I just answered my question. But why? Okay, let me ask you this. Do you think that your response to the divorce was typical or non-typical? Your level of depression that you experienced. Have you spoke with other divorced couples? Do they, or people, or men or women, do they get, on average, or do the majority get as depressed as you did through when you went through divorce?
Well, that's a very loaded question, because there are so many variables, and one of the biggest variables is how invested and how committed you were to the relationship. There are people that I've talked to that are, they seem like on the surface that they are not as affected by the divorce as I was, but it's because at face value they wanted it as equally, like they're like, yeah, this isn't working out. We both changed. We want different things in life. I did not want. I didn't want divorce for so many reasons. A, because I genuinely loved my wife. or at least I thought I did. She would disagree with that, but I loved her. I thought I did. I was committed. I didn't like the way it was going to affect my relationship with my kids, my so many things, selfish and selfless, that were going to change because of the divorce. So I think I handled it based on my variables. I think I handled it like most people would have handled it. Now, if you ask me, do I think I handled it well or in a healthy manner? No, not at all. I think here's the thing that we're battling with that should be another topic is feelings versus knowledge, knowing. Like, you may feel like doing something or you may feel a certain way, but you know that it is bad or counterproductive or vice versa. You may feel good about something, that is bad, or you may feel bad about something that is good, right? And so what do we do when our feelings contradict our knowledge, our knowing? What is there a better way to say that? Knowing, our feeling versus
not intuition, right?
Well, intuition. No, because intuition is a feeling.
Okay, so
like
feeling versus
thinking.
Okay, yeah.
Feeling versus thinking,
okay,
So like your brain versus your emotions, right? So if I like what got me through and what made me not commit suicide was not my feelings. It was my thinking, because I knew what was right. And so I didn't do what I felt like doing. Okay? Now, if I would have let my thinking overcome my feelings and my emotions, I wouldn't have been as severely depressed as I got, right? Because I knew, like, there are these certain truths, and I'm just speaking from personal experience. There were certain truths in my life, capital T truths, that I hung on to. I believed that God had a better plan for me. I believed that there was a better marriage coming. I believed that things were going to work out good for me, but I didn't feel those. I didn't feel them, man.
Yeah.
Okay, and so the feeling got the best of me, and that affected me, and that's how I reacted and acted off those feelings for the majority of the time. But I could anchor in those thinking, that
Yeah.
there's hope, there's truth, and that's what ultimately got me through.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But only when I hit the rock bottom of like, okay, now I'm really suicidal. No, I know that's wrong. I know there's a better tomorrow, and I know. This is what I told myself, and this is what is so crazy, because I'm telling you right now, nobody except for those who have gone through this can attest to this. But despite feeling so low, I knew beyond what I saw and I felt that one day I would look back at this thing that I went through and be like, oh man, I'm so much better off.
Yeah.
I'm not there yet. Right? Like, I think that's 5 more years from now, 10 more years from now. But that is one of the thoughts that got me through. And I'm telling you, it's so abstract. It's so bizarre to be suicidal and to say, man, I know that one day in the future, I'm going to look back at this and be like, man, that was nothing. That was a breeze. Like, I'm so glad I'm so much better. I'm so much stronger, etc. And I'm starting to feel that, right? Like, I'm over that huge depression. I've been going to therapy now for a couple months, and I'm in a much better place. But to answer your question, I think I handled it probably how a lot of people would have handled it given the variables, how I felt, but I don't think I handled it well.
That's interesting that you differentiate the feeling through intellect, right? Is that the mind versus the heart, you could say? Yeah, that's very interesting. So So you saying that other people that you've spoken to who've gone through divorce, I mean, you don't really know for sure, but I mean, typically anybody you talk to that you're not super close to just kind of gives you a superficial,
Yeah.
like they just kind of give you a superficial their superficial emotions, and it's like when you go to a store and say, "How's your day going?" "Good," you know, but really the person. There's this funny Jim Carrey stand-up act he did years ago, and he says that one of his acts, he's like, so you know, you go to a store and it's like, "How you doing?" "Oh, good, good." And he's like, "Sometimes I like to throw him off, you know. It's like, how you doing?" He's like, "I'm all dead inside, man." It's like, "I got no reason to live." And the person in the character's like, "Okay, paper and plastic." Because they don't want to deal with it, right?
Yeah.
You want to sit down and start, "Oh, well, sit down and tell me all about it because, you know, I got time." And maybe that's why, you know, maybe that's why, because, you know, you talked about how we are embarrassed of being depressed, but, you know, I mean, maybe some people are, but I would say, at least from my perspective, is that you don't want to be a hindrance to anybody.
Well,
you know, it's like, I
let
don't
me.
want to bother you with my problems. Like, just live your life, because I'm sure you have yours. Like,
Yeah.
why should I over encumber you with my problems when you're having a crappy time right now
Yeah.
too? So maybe that's just it, man. We all just don't want to bother each other. So
Okay, is that accurate? I mean, I think what you said is accurate, but should we adhere, or should we
is that good? Like, should we be doing that? Yeah.
Because let me tell you something, and I don't want to, man, I don't want to ruin your train of thought, but I think this will help. But I have no answer, unfortunately. I did that when I was at the lowest of my low.
Yeah.
When people asked me how I was doing, I answered them honestly.
Yeah.
I was like, "I'm not doing so well right now, man. Things are not good."
That's good.
And
what were their responses to that?
man, it was a mixed bag for sure,
Yeah.
but I never got any in hindsight, looking back, and maybe I'm articulating it like wrongly, maybe it didn't happen like this because I'm just basing this off of memory. I didn't get a great response. And what I mean by great is a helpful response.
And you know what? And that's probably what the problem is that people are so out of touch with heavier subjects, and maybe because they're out of touch with themselves, that they do not know how to respond to somebody. So the natural thing is to be like, "Oh, like, go talk to somebody who's a professional," because man, there's that resistance because people just don't know how to handle it.
Which is why we are talking about it right now, and which is why my hope is that the viewers then change their inner circles, conversations where it's acceptable to talk about these. Like, if you ask somebody how they are, and they really answer you, be somewhat equipped to give them an empathetic or sympathetic response. You're right, Conrad. Nobody's this is a blanket statement and it's probably not fair, but nobody's equipped to deal with these heavier, weightier conversations because we're so superficial. But you brought up a great point. Are we burdening in a bad way? Is it bad to burden somebody with that? I did it because and I stopped you and I wanted to bring that out. The fact that I did do that because I thought it was important, but I only did that because I was suicidal. You know what I mean?
It's like you're reaching out.
I wanted,
like, give me something, man.
Dude, if I would have committed suicide, there would have been tens, if not hundreds of people that could have said, "Oh man, you know what? He did reach out." It wasn't like people would not have been to say, "Oh, I didn't know Tom was on suicide." I mean, think about how I talked to you. Like, dude, I made it very clear that I was not in a good place in my life. And I did that because it was my last ditch effort to be like, man, maybe somebody will speak into my life and help me out. And it worked, you know, like I got my core family and my core value of circle of friends showed up. You know, like you especially, dude, like you were a safe haven throughout the whole thing. But that just speaks to my whole point in this conversation: preventative and ways to get over it once you are depressed. One of the ways to get over it when you are depressed is by speaking about it to friends that care,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
they can reach down into the pit if they're equipped with love, support, non-judgment, and pull you out.
That's right. That's right. Because those are the best people, because they just want the best for you, and that's it, with nothing, no agenda attached. Um, yeah. Look, man. I think the thing is, what I think the way things are, the way things are now, as far as being able to go out in public and talk to somebody and be open to just total strangers, it's an accumulation of, it's been an accumulated psychological um, impression that's been happening for years. So, and what I mean by that is, I probably used the wrong words there, but what I mean is that we've been conditioned how to become callous
Yeah.
through years and years of the way our society now runs, which is this, man. We are taught very well how to be insecure, have low self-esteem, how to hate everybody. There's so much hate that is preached everywhere. How everybody is out to get you. So we have this fear-based mentality. We're very biased towards a lot of things, towards each other, and so it's as if some people walk around with this constant guard, because they feel like at any given moment somebody is just going to attack them, and not just physically, of course. I mean, that's one thing, but pretty much just mentally, just with speech, and how, or am I going to offend somebody?
Yeah.
God, I can't even talk to anybody now, because you never know who's going to be offended today.
Yeah.
And so, but man, it's like there's this deep yearning inside of everybody to just be able to talk, man. And it's so funny. Yesterday, day before yesterday, I went to a little fast food restaurant and dropped in and grabbed a burrito or something. And I was the only one in there. And a girl was behind the counter. I think she was probably 19 or 20 years old, sweeping. She came out, she helped me, and she came out and started sweeping the thing. And man, she was so talkative and expressive. Just the way she expressed her emotions openly. She just had that I don't care attitude, but man, you can tell she just had no, she had no
Filter? Or...
not filter, but she wasn't apprehensive to share her, just to be herself.
Yeah.
And she generally had a good vibe about her, and that seemed like that's just one very rare person. But yeah, so I think that's the thing. It's if you don't practice something often, then you're not going to be good at it. And so if you don't practice how to be receptive to others' emotions, and how to allow yourself to be open to others, excuse me, then you will become a clammed up person. And if everybody becomes a clammed up person, you'll have a clammed up society.
Which, just so you know, part of the problem in what you just said is ignorance. Some people just don't. The majority of people probably don't even know that they are those things.
Yeah.
You know, they don't even know to practice not being that way, because they don't perceive themselves as being that way.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's just a matter, man. I tell you, I think one of the best ways to overcome that. I mean, if you are an individual, because I'm not gonna make any general claims and say everybody, but I want to say this, man. If you are an individual who doesn't know how to be open with emotions, and I would say a few things. Number one, you have to genuinely care about other people. Number two, you have to be confident in yourself enough to know that nobody can take anything away from you. So if you're a person who is very easily offended, you have very, very, very low self-esteem, and you allow people to get you down very easily, well, that's something that you can work on and that can be worked on. But I know this, if you are somebody who genuinely cares about life and other people, and you express that to everybody, even in the simplest ways, like going to the coffee shop and talking to the barista, just a few simple questions, just have a simple conversation, just genuinely ask some questions about that person, or comment nicely about somebody, then is these little things that help build each other up. And man, you never know, just a simple little conversation like that could make somebody's day.
Yeah.
Just a little conversation, a couple questions about, man, I remember one time, oh, this was powerful. It was the simplest little thing, but it was so powerful. A good buddy of mine in Connecticut, he's about 65 years old now. I used to work with him a lot. His daughter passed away about 3 or 4 years ago. She was 26, and I've known this guy for, I don't know, 6 or 7 years, and this happened, and obviously it was extremely hard, and but he's got through it, or he's getting through it. Whatever he had to do with to get to that point, I don't know, but him and I were in a drive-through going to work, and we stopped somewhere and we got a couple coffees, and there was a young girl there. She was probably about 22 or 23. She was in good spirits, and she helped us out, and so we paid, and she handed us the coffee, and we're at the drive-thru, and she says, have a great day, and he says, hey, I just want to say I really appreciate you being here. Like, thank you for being here. Mm-hmm. And she kind of was like, oh, I don't know how to respond to that, because that was kind of an odd thing to say.
Yeah.
You don't hear anybody say, hey, I just want to. I mean, just the way he said it too, you could tell, because I know what he went through, right? Mm-hmm. And so it was so genuine. I could just totally feel what
you could sense.
I could totally sense it.
Yeah.
And I knew where it was coming from. And when he said that, he's like, man, I just want to. I think he said something along the lines of, I just want to. I appreciate you being here. And she was just like, she's like kind of got red, and like in a really like positive way. And she was like, like a really appreciative way. And she was like, oh, thank you. Because at first she didn't get it, but then it happens in microseconds.
Yeah.
And, but man, it was so powerful, and just something like that was somebody who didn't hold back a feeling. That mm-hmm. was somebody who wasn't apprehensive, just said it, and it cost him nothing. Mm-hmm. It cost him nothing to say it, and man, it impacted her, and it impacted me as the observer. I was like, man, that is powerful, and so but yeah, that's just going along the lines of just talk. If you're like sharing emotion, because we're humans, we're human beings, and we need that. We need that connection with other people, complete strangers, man. Very powerful.
Well, you're talking about a practical application, right? Something that you can do, and along those lines of practical applications, you talk about the usage of our vocabulary, our words, and how they're tools, and how we can use those, and the power to influence somebody's day by being positive. That's one practical application. Well, another practical application, to your point that you already made, is asking somebody about their day, but doing it in a way that is both genuine and not common, right? To say to somebody, hey man, how are you doing? How's it going?
Yeah.
That's a very common phrase that somebody might hear a number of times a day. Right. But to ask somebody something very specific and detailed about their day goes
about them.
Yes, very specifically, like, hey, how are you doing right now? Mm-hmm. Like, I mean, just, the way you use your words, how genuine you are, etc.
You could be like, hey, how are you doing?
Yeah. Yeah. hey,
Instead of hey, how you doing? It's hey,
how?
how are you doing?
Yes. But seriously, and then if they answer good, like sometimes I'll even ask them a second time. No, seriously, how are you doing?
Yeah.
And it's like, and part of that is intuition, to be able to sense people's feelings, but man,
Can you imagine marrying a robot? And you make me think I'm joking, but imagine marrying a robot, and this robot is just anatomically perfect, right?
Wow.
It's got big vocabulary. It can
I was
talk to
thinking
you
nice
on
buttocks.
everything. Imagine Siri with a body and 500 times smarter and
Evolved.
very evolved.
Yeah.
And not only that, but they look super real.
Yeah.
And however, no matter how close to human being this AI robot was, you were given the pre-knowledge that this was a robot.
Yep.
It's like, hey man, it's kind of like a movie AI. Remember that movie came out years ago?
Yeah. Was that Will Smith?
No, no, that was something else. I'm
Was
talking
it with
about
a little kid?
Yeah, Haley Joel Osment and Jude Law was in it.
Yeah.
And
There's water.
yeah, there's water.
Yeah.
It's about a family whose I think child passes away, so they adopt this
Yeah.
robot and
Yeah.
they try to love it like their own.
Never seen it. Never heard of it.
So anyway, so imagine that.
I'm imagining.
And so you're sitting there thinking, man, no matter how perfect this thing is and how well it works, I just know that it's a robot.
Mm-hmm.
And tying this into going to like a coffee shop and people serving people all the time, and every person comes to them with the same question, the same response, the same interaction, we could see how that would become extremely not only monotonous but very depressing, because everybody is just a robot.
Yeah.
Everybody's just like responds to you the same way, and there's no real human connection.
Yeah.
And so how do you break that? Just by asking the questions and being very, very genuine about them, and genuinely caring about the person. Because you know that affect how much that affects them, and it affects the asker too. The asker, you got the asker and then the askee, right? So if I walk up to somebody and ask them a question and say, "Hey, how are you doing today?" and I'm asking them, but it's helping the both of us because we're not being robots.
Yeah.
That seems to be that ties along with not being able to.
So you're saying, is what you're saying that if I'm married to a robot and she comes up to me and asks me how I'm doing, I'm going to respond in a very atypical way because of my knowledge of it being a robot asking me, versus how I would respond in a not so typical way had I known it was not a robot, because the person on the other side of, let's just say, the coffee shop is perceiving the robots asking them, hey, every customer of mine is a robot. They come in, they ask me how I'm doing, I respond in a certain way, but man, I just sensed a real human today. It was weird. This human came in.
No, I was pretty much. What I was trying to get at there was that.
Yeah, tell me. Because you brought this robot in, and I'm like, where's this wife of robot come in?
Well, look, here's what I was saying. And I think this is probably why maybe some people are pretty miserable out there, is because. And maybe there's a lot less than I think. I don't know. But the point is that if there are people out there going through this, then so be it. Here's the thing. I think look, I mean, I don't know about you, man, but if you listen to some news and do some research, then you can see that statistics are showing that our suicide rate is much higher than it's ever been. It's higher than it's ever been.
Yeah.
More depressed people, more drugs are being prescribed.
Yeah.
Man, I'm telling you, I think what's happening is that people are starting to live in a robot society. Because look at what how much time we spend on our gadgets and social media. Like, even though it seems like it's so real, like the robot wife,
Yeah.
you know in the back of your mind, it's not real. It's not genuine human to human interaction. It's human to human interaction, but through a filter. So it's not real human to human interaction. And I think that's what's happening, man, is that people are battling this thing. You know, it's like we love to do things to our phones, and the internet's huge, and there's AI everywhere you go now. Our cars are driving themselves, and you can go to a fast food. You can go to McDonald's now, not even have to go up to the teller. You can walk up to a kiosk, type in your thing, and the machine spits your food out. I mean, look, man, that's going to become it's going to get worse in that regard, and maybe that's where the next revolution happens. Is
Well,
when
to your
technology starts to take over and we start going insane because we don't have that. We're losing that connection.
Yeah, I honestly, I firmly believe that if the platform has any effect on society as a whole, bigger than ourselves, it will be to combat that very issue.
Yeah.
To get away from this era of screens and disconnection. But here, let me just show you this. Let me point out this shift that I'm seeing in conversation, because I want to come to a closure. We have now started to talk about the reason for depression, right? And I think we should table that for another conversation.
Yeah.
And conclude this one. But I also think that we should pick right back up in the next episode.
Yeah.
Still talking about some preventative and ways to. I think we should do some research and come up with some bullet points on here are some ways that you may or may not be able to prevent depression or feeling sad or whatever. Look at the glass half full. Have purpose, have meaning. Surround yourself with people that bring value to your life instead of take it away, positive, etc. And then also, here are some ways to get out of depression if you feel it coming on. First of all, open up, talk about it, be transparent, be vulnerable, don't be ashamed, etc. Therapy, and talk about those points, and then continue on. What do we think are some reasons that we become depressed? And I think that is one of the biggest reasons is because we are so. What do you know the saying where we're the most connected that we've ever been, and the most at the same time the most disconnected that we've ever been?
Yeah.
I don't know how that saying is. I think there's
I think you pretty much got it. But yeah, I mean, there's different variables, but ways of saying it. But I think that's exactly the thing. We're becoming we're more connected, but less. Yeah, but more disconnected.
Yeah.
I know what you're talking about. I forget who said that. At least the one I'm thinking of. But yeah, and so that's the thing. It's like you got the platform, you got a way to listen to it, and I love this format because we're not trying to be a fast-paced, sell you something quick type of gig here. I mean, this is just normal conversation. I mean, we're doing this in real time, and there's no editing, there's no fancy little what do they call them, tags. And so we're just trying to talk to you as a human being, talk to each other as human beings,
get the ball rolling
here. And so yeah, so listen, man, I think if anybody out there is going through a hard time and they can implement what Tom just said, and if for some reason some of these things might be too hard for you, just know that there's something way bigger is going on out there, something's bigger than what you're going through, so that to have that hope and just to always be open to that good which is coming, and it's actually already there. You just have to shift perspective, and And so maybe right now for an individual, just by listening to this is good
Yeah.
enough for now. Like, just get to the next day, and we're gonna be here and continue on.
And to, just to already tie in previous conversations that we've had, which hopefully each episode to some degree builds on the others, to feel it, right?
Yeah.
And we can explain what that means
Yeah, that's
in the
right.
next
Yeah,
episode.
yeah. Feel it.
But to
Yeah,
actually
yeah.
feel it, that is one of the
Yeah.
most valuable
Yeah.
either preventions or to get yourself out of it, is not just to fake it,
Yeah.
but to feel
Feel it. Yep.
yeah, and how you can get there.
Yeah, and we can get into we'll get into that too. The
Yeah.
whole
The feels.
feelings, vibrational frequency, all that stuff, and sometimes it even gets scientific, and we
Yeah.
can explain it through many different ways. But anyway, yeah, man, it's gonna get better. So it's gonna get good, and it already is good.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
Yep. See you guys.